So the main thing I wanted to highlight when it comes to the LEC is just the beauty of the format change. I think it's painfully obvious how detrimental to player growth the BO1 format is, where we have super week after super week after super week, where there's barely any time to practice or to breathe. And now we have a circumstance where you have like a very long regular split, right, with best of threes, single round robin, top 6 teams qualify, and you just see such a clear contrast to how teams are actively improving. You see a team like Team Heretics who have improved how they play together with support and jungle in terms of playing for tempo. They worked on a lot of the similar things that the LEC also worked on, and it's very obvious in that series. It was very competitive against KC. I think that they have good draft ideas, and if you compare Team Heretics to how they played the last year, sorry, not last year, but last split, where they had to basically scramble for BO1s permanently and scramble for survival permanently, they were just playing comps that scaled and that kind of would win only if the enemy team fell over, which honestly is a fair strategy if you think about the short term, because they did get wins against the likes of Koi and Rogue, and they did make playoffs, while other teams were trying to play more complicated League of Legends. I think the same thing can be said for SK. They seem to also, slowly grow, and they tend to figure things out. I think the same thing can be said for Vitality. I think that Rogue and with Adam, they're starting to look better and better in comparison to, of course, the winter split. So in my mind, I think there is a clear signaling in terms of seeing who can potentially do a little bit better and challenge for the mid-table. And I think that's a good thing. And there's obviously going to be teams that lag behind, like GX and Rogue in the standings. GX seems to be just at a constant level of stagnation. And I do think that with their level of play, I do think that you can isolate either the changes to jungle, but also in terms of how much they're improving, because they are, just getting worse and worse. I don't see any signs of life here from GX, and I think this is something where you can call out, for example, the coaching staff, because I do think that in terms of the player caliber, when I see Noah, June, and Jackie's, I feel like this team should be already mid-table competitive, but currently GX is not, especially after the loss against SK. Them having a close game where they almost ended it against SK shouldn't be anything to hang in the Christmas tree, and there's a lot of teams around them that are just doing so much better, so much better. Rogue, same thing, but at least there's some signs of life. They have some solid, early game scenarios. I think Adam has, improved his champion pool, and there's definitely like moments where he looks good. The main issue for Rogue is just, once again, is just the standings are looking terrible for them. They are 1-4 and getting into, of course, the top 6 is super tough. And the only kind of hope is that the middle table is extremely competitive. But I think it's important to highlight that Koi, of course, has played against G2 and Fnatic as well. And on top of that, SK Gaming won a series against Fnatic straight up. So SK is in a very good spot because they have some weak opponents still left to play, weak on paper, right? So it's going to be very challenging for Rogue to cross into the other territories, considering the head-to-heads that, of course, Rogue has lost. If you look at their scheduling, they have Fnatic, KC, and Koi left. That looks extremely difficult for Rogue to even make it to top 6, or even consider top 6. For the rest of the squads, if you take a look at them, Team BDS, let's take a look at their matchups, SK and Vitality and Heretics. I think those are the big ones. You have Team BDS, they have G2, Fnatic. I think GX and Vitality are the big matches that they need to, of course, perform in to make it into the top 6. You have SK Gaming, they have Team Heretics, Rogue left, and Vitality. I think that the Koi G2 matchups are the tough ones. The important ones are, of course, the head-to-heads when we isolate them for those competing for the top 6 spot. And then finally, Vitality here, Team Heretics, BDS, and then SK Gaming. Vitality, of course, having, only, only 3 series played. That's also part of the scheduling, right? Is that some teams just have played more series than some of the others. That's why Vitality here on paper is kind of lagging behind, but I have high hopes for Vitality. If I want to make a prediction for who is going to crack top 6, if we take for granted that this top 4 is unmovable, which I think is very, very fair to say, right? This top 4 making it into the upper bracket of the playoffs. If I had to choose, in terms of who stands out for gameplay, I think that Team Heretics and Team Vitality are, to me, the two most interesting teams out of the bottom 6. I think that SK Gaming, they've shown lows, they've shown some highs, but I think that the level of how they operate in terms of macro and, some of the champions that they rely on, and maybe sometimes I think Genex is getting a little bit too creative, because I do think that he should take sometimes maybe a backseat on this team. I do think that SK, the biggest advantage is that they took that series against Fnatic, but I do think that they will fall shortly behind. I feel like Team Heretics and Team Vitality have shown me the best level of gameplay, I think. The main, argument against Team Vitality is, of course, the loss against Rogue. But, some of those series, when you see somebody pick Yasuo in a, of course, terrible game, then there was the Akali top. I wonder if these are things that they will, ever do again. But then again, the beauty of best of threes is that we are kind of programmed to rush to conclusions, because you could do so in the previous splits, and rightfully so, because if a team played bad in the BO1s, the odds of them recovering was next to nothing, because it was extremely hard, because you only have like 3 practice days and you need a recovery day and all that jazz. Usually whatever people brought to week 1 is what they're going to stick with, but I see steady improvements from Team Heretics in particular, So I am hopeful for Team Heretics, Team Vitality. Those are the guys that I'm going to put in the top side, together with the rest of the squads. BDS, I just wanted to highlight their matchups again. They have, of course, Fnatic and G2. So the Vitality versus BDS matchup is going to be like an absolutely massive one. That is going to be such a big game in 1.5 weeks. That is such a big game, because it determines so much in terms of how the bracket plays out. And same thing for Team Heretics against Team Vitality. So I guess in in terms of where the matchups are, even though I think Vitality and Team Heretics look the most interesting to me to go top 6, it looks like we're in a world where it looks tricky for both Team Heretics, for Vitality and Team Heretics to make it because of the head-to-heads. But we will see. We will see. I think that BDS Vitality matchup is going to decide everything. I don't see a world where GX is going to return or make a comeback. Team Heretics is in a nice position here, playing 3 matchups that should be very winnable for them. Very winnable. Looking at the top side, if I would kind of define these 3 teams currently, I think that Carmine Corp was probably like the team that macro-wise is like mechanically super, super good. The main concern for me with KC is that in the initial weeks that they played, I do think that they, like how I justified it is that, KC is experimenting. They're playing the Akali, they're playing the Silas, they're trying to, of course, expand their draft. And then when they want to, they go back to the good old. But even here, right, with the Ivan Elise, it looked terrible, right? And the draft was really, really bad. There was also that moment on mic check where KC pretty much said, like Taragama said, this draft is so fucking awful as they're heading into the game, which was a crazy reaction, right, from a player as you head into game, even though it was true, right? In terms of where KC is, he had to beat a Lucian mid and played the classic Talia. In case of where KC is, my main concern for them and the level of play they are showing, if we think about the context of them winning, of course, winning LEC, because of course they are very, very fine in the standings. My concern is that currently Targamas and Yike are not playing together at all. They are just not coordinated at all. They're not playing together at all. And KC are winning a lot of these games because mechanically they're just outperforming the enemy in very, very bad game states. If we just pull up Carmine Corp's stats in terms of the early game, I am very certain that it's a very, very ugly statistic. If we isolate Spring, they have a goal differential at 15 that, like, basically considering how much they've won, that is kind of a crazy statistic to be working with. KC win team fights late into the game because they are mechanically super good and have great team fighting, but currently their early game and jungle super coordination and drafting really needs a lot of work. But the upside for KC, of course, is that team fighting and mechanics are way tougher to teach than all of these things that they've shown that they're capable of doing in, of course, winter to win the split and also do well at first stand. This is going to be like the main challenge that they need to overcome. But KC definitely out of the top 3 teams currently in their current form do look the weakest. The strongest looking team currently is G2 in my mind. We need to keep in mind that G2 hasn't had the tough schedule yet. G2 still didn't play against, excuse me, Fnatic. G2 didn't play against KC as well. So they don't have the big ones, you know, the big matches under the belt. But I do think G2 is a team that currently understands themselves the best and also the enemy the best. I feel like G2 have a very, very good approach to macro, how they close out games. And I really, really like their, you know, how consistent they are at delivering wins throughout their leads. I think they're the most consistent and most coherent team. It just looks like a very, very well-coached team right now in terms of how G2 play out things. But a lot of those things are easier to do against easier opponents. So the main challenge will be against fucking G2, Fnatic, and of course KC. But I think currently in the current form, G2 looks like they have by far the highest floor out of any team here in the league. Fnatic, I think that Fnatic, they have high upside because they have a wide range of champions they can play. They have very, very high level sequences, but it's the same old Fnatic. Their inconsistency is what's fucking concerning. Their SK series sticks out as a sore thumb. That game 1 against KC was also awful, but they bounced back quick. And it seems like Duffman, the hiring that they did, seems to have a great effect on their mid to late game. There seems to be a great, kind of a level up in terms of how they approach the macro, which is good. I think that's how they defeated Vitality in the end, which was super nice. I do think Fnatic, in terms of potential, at the end of this split, I could see a world where Fnatic potentially look like a winner. Because I also think Fnatic as a team benefits from the fact that the season is very long and they can iron out a lot of the issues that are showing on stage. Because if you think about Fnatic in winter, they played the W1s good, and then the best of 3 started, and they had close series against BDS, and then they need to recover quickly. Now everything is exposed early, and they can, of course, address those issues earlier on. But Fnatic, we truly don't know what Fnatic is going to be up to until their backs are against the wall. And I have to say that series against KC was extremely close if you, of course, remove that Game 5. Obviously, that Game 5 is extremely important, so removing it is kind of redundant. But Fnatic against KC was still a pretty damn solid series considering how hard KC stomped G2 in the end in the finals. I think that Fnatic look super, super interesting. And then finally on Koi, the only team we didn't talk about. I think Koi looked rough in the first 2 series, but it was against KC and G2. So we kind of gave them a pass somewhat. I think that Koi have done everything they can do against Team Heretics and BDS for me to get excited again. We got to see mid win on very unique champion choices like the Varus again into the Rumble, which is super cool. We got to see them actually close out games. We see Giorgio Pune playing better again, and then Lioya seems to be in fucking great form. So Koi, as a potential spoiler, I don't think they're better than the top 3 teams in the BO5, but I do think that Koi is kind of ramping up again because I did kind of lose my hope in them for a while there. So Koi definitely a very interesting top 4 team. In regards to the LEC, I'm happy with the format. There's definitely days that are more boring, but from a competitive aspect point of view, this is much better. We have a very, very nice parity here for, of course, spot 5 and 6. We have a clear top 4 that is competitive with one another. I think that the LEC is in a fucking fantastic state. And sometimes viewership and the excitement of a league, yeah, you need a little bit of luck, right? It's very, very good for the league that Koi is competitive, KC is competitive, and G2 and Fnatic are fielding great rosters. So the big fan bases are very, very happy here. And, in terms of what the bottom half of the table are doing, there is a chance here for, some players to reach playoffs and to have an impact, like a Knock Knock or like a Carlsen from Team Heretics. So I do think that this is looking super, super cool. Giant X, Rogue, you guys are looking cursed as fuck. Giants in particular. I just want to show you guys Giants match history. This is their 3-0 start in LEC Winter. Here's Gilotto saying G2 won't make Worlds. And they have won a grand total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. And the majority of those wins are against Team Heretics, who are very weak in LEC Winter, and Rogue, objectively the weakest team in Europe right now. So this is insanely cursed. 3-0 weekend in a super week really, really got into people's heads. And with them losing closer and now Isma going into the team, it looks like they're never going to recover. So I'm excited for this weekend of LEC.